L. Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It's a classic story. People have read it for over 100 years. This story is full of magic and wonder. It makes you think about courage and kindness. But some people might wonder about the person who wrote it. They might ask tough questions. One question is this: was the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz a suspected criminal? It's a strong question. It makes you pause. Most people think of Baum as a gentle storyteller. He created a world of munchkins and flying monkeys, so the idea of him being a criminal sounds really out of place. This isn't a simple yes or no. You have to look at his life. You have to look at the times he lived in. You have to understand what being a suspected criminal meant back then, and you have to look at everything we know about him today. Let's be clear from the start. There is no evidence L. Frank Baum was a suspected criminal in any legal sense. He was not accused of crimes, he was not arrested for crimes, he was not investigated by police for crimes. This is a very important point. But just saying no isn't enough. We need to explore his life in detail. We need to see if there's anything that could make someone even think this. Sometimes history gets complicated. People have flaws. Public figures can make mistakes, they can hold views that are terrible by today's standards. We should look at all of that. But we also need to be careful. We need to separate moral failings from actual criminal acts. L. Frank Baum had a long and varied life. He was born in 1856, he died in 1919, he lived through big changes in America. He tried many different jobs. He was a chicken breeder, he was a theater manager, he was an actor, he ran a general store, he was a newspaper editor. Then, he became a famous writer. He worked hard, he often struggled with money, but none of his struggles led to him being a criminal. He was known as a kind person, he loved children, he told them stories. This is the image most people have of him. This is the image that history generally supports. The idea of a suspected criminal usually means someone the police are watching, or someone the community widely believes has done something illegal. This is about breaking the law. It's about actions that would lead to legal punishment. It's not about being unpopular. It's not about being financially careless. It's about crime. And when you look at L. Frank Baum's life, that element just isn't there. His life had its share of challenges. He faced financial hardship many times. His chicken breeding venture failed. His theater company went bankrupt. His general store in South Dakota also failed. These were business failures. They were not crimes. Many people go bankrupt. Many people have businesses that don't work out. It's a part of life. It doesn't mean they broke the law. Baum was often in debt. He worked hard to pay people back. He tried new things to earn money. He kept trying. His motivation was to support his family. He wanted to provide for his wife Maud and their 4 sons. This drive led him to write. It led him to create. It did not lead him to crime. When we look at his personal life, it was pretty stable. He was married to Maud for a long time. They had a strong relationship. He was a devoted father. There are no stories of him getting into brawls. No reports of him stealing. No accusations of fraud in his business dealings, beyond the businesses simply not making money. He didn't have a secret life as a rogue. He wasn't involved in any shady deals. He was a public figure in several communities. First in Syracuse, New York, then in Aberdeen, South Dakota, then in Chicago, Illinois, and later in Hollywood, California. In all these places, his life was generally open. If there had been any hint of criminal activity, it likely would have been known, and it would have been reported, but there's nothing. So, the simplest answer is still the best one here. L. Frank Baum was not a suspected criminal. There is nothing in his long history that points to any legal wrongdoing. No police records, no court documents, no credible accounts from his contemporaries. He might have been a dreamer. He might have been a bit impractical with money, but he was not a criminal. This is important to establish right away. It helps to clear the air. Now we can look deeper into the parts of his life that might raise questions. We can explore why someone might even think to ask this question. L. Frank Baum lived a varied life before he became the famous author of Oz. He tried many things. Some worked, some didn't. He was a dreamer and an inventor. And he even had an idea for an early type of movie projector. He was always looking for new ways to make a living. He was also a family man. He married Maud Gage in 1882. She was the daughter of a famous women's rights activist, Matilda Joslyn Gage. This connection is actually important. Maud's mother was an advocate for many progressive causes. These included women's suffrage and Native American rights. This will become relevant later. And Baum's early jobs were not glamorous. He bred fancy chickens for a while. It was a business idea that didn't take off. Then he tried his hand at theater. He wrote plays. He acted in them. He managed a theater company. This was something he loved, but it was not a path to steady income. His theater company went bankrupt. These were hard times for him and Maud. They decided to move west. They went to Aberdeen, Dakota Territory in 1888. This was a new frontier town. Baum hoped for a fresh start. In Aberdeen, he first opened a general store. He called it Baum's Bazaar. He sold everything from toys to dishes. He tried to make it a community hub. But the frontier economy was tough. People often didn't have much money. They sometimes paid with goods instead of cash. The store eventually failed. Again, this was a financial setback. It wasn't a crime. He declared bankruptcy. This is a legal process for people who can't pay their debts. It's not illegal. It's a way to deal with severe financial trouble. After the store, Baum bought a local newspaper. It was called the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer. He became the editor. This was a period where he wrote a lot. He wrote about local news. He wrote about community issues. He also wrote opinion pieces. These editorials are the one part of his life that has drawn heavy criticism in modern times. We will talk more about these, but for now, it's important to note that even these controversial writings did not lead to him being a suspected criminal at the time. His time in Aberdeen was tough. By 1891, he had lost his store and his newspaper. He and Maud decided to move again. This time they went to Chicago. Chicago was a big, bustling city. It offered more opportunities. Baum worked as a reporter for a while. He also worked as a traveling salesman. He sold china and glassware. It was a difficult grind. He was trying to support his growing family. And it was during these years in Chicago that he started writing stories for children. He had always been good at making up tales. His sons and their friends loved his stories. His first successful children's book was Mother Goose in Prose in 1897. Then came Father Goose, his book, in 1899. Both were popular, but it was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900 that changed everything. It was an instant hit. It made him famous. It made him a beloved storyteller. From then on, he focused mostly on writing. He wrote many more Oz books. He wrote other fantasy stories too. He used different pen names for some of them. He was a prolific writer. He was good at creating imaginative worlds. Even with the success of Oz, his financial life was still up and down. He tried to turn his books into stage plays. He started a movie studio in California. Not all of these ventures were successful. He invested in different projects. He sometimes lost money. He was an artist more than a shrewd businessman. But again, these were business risks. They were not criminal enterprises. He never engaged in fraud or embezzlement. He never tried to trick people out of money. He simply tried to make his dreams work. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So when you look at the broad strokes of his life, you see a man who was always working. He was always creating, he was always trying to provide for his family, he had his share of failures. He had his share of successes. But there is no chapter in this story that involves him being a suspected criminal. No police reports, no arrests, no charges, no trials. His troubles were financial and creative. They were not legal. This is the truth of his life. It's the record that history shows us. To truly answer the question, we need to dig into the historical record. Was L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, ever a suspected criminal? The simplest and most direct answer is no. There is no evidence in any historical record to suggest he was. This isn't just about a lack of conviction, it's about a complete absence of suspicion, charges, or even credible rumors of criminal behavior throughout his life. Let's break down what being a suspected criminal usually means. It means authorities like the police believe you might have committed a crime. It means they are investigating you. Or it means the public widely believes you are guilty of some illegal act. This would typically involve things like theft, fraud, assault, murder, or other serious offenses. When we look at Baum's life through this lens, nothing fits. We can go through the different phases of his life. His childhood and youth. There are no accounts of him getting into trouble with the law. No stories of truancy, shoplifting, or any other youthful mischief that would lead to police involvement. He came from a well-to-do family. He had a proper upbringing, his early adult life in failed businesses. He tried chicken farming. He managed a theater. He owned a store in Aberdeen. All these ventures failed financially. His theater company went bankrupt. His store in Aberdeen went bankrupt. Bankruptcy is a legal process for dealing with debt. It's not a crime unless it involves fraudulent activity. There are no records or accusations that Baum engaged in fraud during his bankruptcies. He simply wasn't a good businessman. He lost money. That's a financial problem, not a criminal one. Many people face this. His time as a newspaper editor, we will discuss the content of his editorials in more detail later. But even these highly controversial writings did not lead to any criminal suspicion. Publishing an opinion, even a deeply offensive one, was not a crime in itself. It certainly didn't lead to him being suspected of committing a physical crime or financial crime. His career as a successful author, even after becoming famous, Baum continued to face financial challenges. He made money, but he also spent a lot. He invested in projects that didn't always pan out. He tried to start film companies. These often failed. Again, these were business failures. They were not criminal acts. Authors often deal with copyright issues and disputes over their work. Baum had some of these, but these are civil matters. They are about money or ownership. They are not criminal charges. His personal life, Baum, was married for many years to Maud Gage Baum. They had 4 sons. There are no records of domestic disputes that involved law enforcement. No reports of public disturbances, no whispers of scandalous behavior that would suggest he broke the law. He lived a relatively quiet, family-focused life outside of his professional endeavors. Historians and biographers have thoroughly researched L. Frank Baum's life. Major biographies, like those by Michael Patrick Hearn and Catherine M. Rogers, delve deep into every aspect of his existence. They draw on letters, newspaper archives, financial records, and family accounts. None of these extensive works turn up any evidence of criminal activity or even serious criminal suspicion. If there were anything, it would have been uncovered. Biographers are keen to reveal all sides of a person, good and bad. The absence of such findings is telling. In summary, the record is clear. L. Frank Baum was not a suspected criminal. He was a man who tried hard, often failed financially, and eventually found his calling as a storyteller. His struggles were real. His character was generally seen as kind and imaginative. He made no enemies among law enforcement. No one in his community or in the wider public ever raised alarms about him committing crimes. The idea just doesn't fit with the known facts of his life. Now, we must talk about the most controversial aspect of L. Frank Baum's life. This is the one area that, for modern readers, causes the most discomfort and criticism. It's also the one area that might, if misunderstood, lead someone to think about wrongdoing. But it's crucial to distinguish this from legal criminality. I am talking about his editorials concerning Native Americans, published during his time as editor of the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer in South Dakota. Baum lived in Aberdeen, South Dakota from 1888 to 1891. This was a time of great tension on the frontier. The white settlers were moving into lands traditionally occupied by Native American tribes. There were conflicts, there was fear, and there was a lot of prejudice against Native Americans. Baum, like many others, shared in these prejudices. He expressed them in his newspaper. He wrote 2 particularly infamous editorials. The first was published on December 20th, 1890. This was shortly after the killing of Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull was a Hunkpapa Lakota leader. He was killed during an attempt to arrest him. Baum's editorial was titled "No Room for Savages." In it, he wrote about the safety of the frontier settlers. He called for a harsh policy. He said the troublesome Indians must be wiped out. He argued for the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians. He felt this was necessary for the civilization of white men to proceed. These words are shocking and deeply disturbing. They express a genocidal sentiment. The second editorial came out on January 3rd, 1891. This was after the Wounded Knee massacre. At Wounded Knee, U.S. soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed Lakota men, women, and children. Baum's editorial after this event was equally chilling. He praised the soldiers. He called their actions heroic. He said the incident ought to satisfy the hostiles. He repeated his earlier call. He said the settlers' peace would only come when the Native Americans were annihilated. He wrote, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." This common saying of the time reflected extreme racism. Let's be very clear about these writings. They are horrific. They express deeply racist and violent views. They are a stain on Baum's legacy. They show a dark side to his character. They reflect the terrible prejudices of many white people on the frontier at that time. Modern scholars and activists rightly condemn them. They are an uncomfortable truth about the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. However, and this is a critical distinction for our question, these editorials did not lead to him being a suspected criminal. Here's why first. At the time, publishing such opinions, however hateful, was not a crime. Freedom of the press, even for racist views, was protected. There were no laws against hate speech in the same way we might conceive of them today. Many people on the frontier shared these views. Baum was expressing a common, if ugly, sentiment. Second, these were words on paper. They were opinion pieces. While they called for violence, Baum himself was not accused of committing any violence. He was not suspected of being involved in the killing of Sitting Bull or the Wounded Knee massacre. He was not thought to be inciting people to go out and commit crimes. He was publishing his views in a newspaper. Third, no one from the authorities or the public suspected him of any legal wrongdoing because of these words. They might have agreed with him, or they might have disagreed, but it wasn't a matter for the police or the courts. So, while these editorials are morally reprehensible, they do not make L. Frank Baum a suspected criminal in the legal sense. They make him a person who held and expressed deeply racist and violent views. They make him a controversial figure. They make his legacy more complicated. They force us to confront the fact that even beloved authors can have serious moral failings. But moral failing is not the same as criminality. And expressing an abhorrent opinion, though it can incite real-world harm and is deeply unethical, does not equate to being suspected of committing a crime. It's important to understand this difference. When we judge historical figures, we must do so with all the facts. We must acknowledge their context. We must also acknowledge the harm their words or actions might have caused. The Aberdeen editorials are a black mark on Baum's life. They challenge his image as a purely benign storyteller. But they do not offer any evidence that he was ever suspected of breaking the law. They reveal a deeply disturbing aspect of his character, but they don't turn him into a criminal figure. His crime, in the eyes of many modern readers, is a moral one, a betrayal of the ideals of compassion and understanding. It's not a legal crime that led to suspicion or prosecution. To truly understand if L. Frank Baum could have been a suspected criminal, we need to think about what that meant in his era. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were different times. The methods of law enforcement were different. Public communication was different, and what counted as a suspicion had its own distinct character. In Baum's day, if someone was suspected of a crime, it usually became known in the community. Local newspapers were often quick to report on any local scandal or legal trouble. The law enforcement, often led by a sheriff or town marshal, would conduct investigation. People would be arrested, charges would be filed, court records would be created. For a public figure like Baum, who ran a store, edited a newspaper, managed a theater, and later became a famous author in weeks any brush with the law, would likely have been documented. Common crimes that would lead to suspicion included things like theft, burglary, assault, murder, fraud, and embezzlement. These were serious matters. They often had visible consequences. If Baum had been involved in, say, passing bad checks at his store, or engaging in a crooked business deal, or getting into a fight that led to an arrest, these things would have left a paper trail. They would have been talked about, but there is no such trail for L. Frank Baum. His biographers, who have combed through countless historical documents, have found nothing. No police blotters list his name. No court dockets mention him as a defendant in a criminal case. No contemporary newspaper articles report on him being investigated for illegal acts. This absence of evidence is very strong. It shows that he simply wasn't on the radar of law enforcement for criminal activity. What about public suspicion? Could people have quietly suspected him without it being official? This is possible for anyone, of course. Gossip and rumor have always existed, but for someone in Baum's various public roles, it's unlikely that widespread suspicion of actual crime would have stayed completely hidden. He was a visible figure in small towns and then in larger cities. If he had been, for example, a con artist or a secret swindler, it's hard to imagine that wouldn't have come to light. His family connections, especially through his wife Maud's mother, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, were also prominent. The Gage family was deeply involved in social justice. Any serious criminal taint on Baum would likely have been a significant issue for them. His reputation overall was one of an imaginative man. He was someone with big ideas. He was seen as a kind person. He dedicated his life to entertaining children. This public image is hard to reconcile with the idea of a secret criminal. People in his communities might have seen him as a bit impractical with money. They might have known he struggled with business ventures, but impractical is a long way from criminal. It's also worth noting the differences in how public figures were scrutinized. While the media landscape was different, newspapers were still powerful. They were competitive. If a prominent local figure was suspected of a crime, it would have been big news. The lack of any such reports about Baum strongly indicates that no such suspicions existed. His personal correspondence and the memoirs of people who knew him also offer no hints of criminal behavior. His friends, family, and colleagues never wrote about him in a way that would suggest he was involved in anything illegal. The closest we get to suspicion in Baum's life, as discussed, is the modern ethical condemnation of his racist editorials. But that's a different kind of judgment. It's a moral judgment from a later era. It's not the same as being suspected of committing a legal crime at the time. The words he wrote were abhorrent, but they were not, in his time, grounds for criminal investigation against him. So when we look at the nature of suspicion in his era and how it would have played out, Baum's life remains clear. He did not behave in ways that would have led to him being a suspected criminal. He was not a hidden villain. He was not a man running from the law. He was a writer, a businessman, a family man, with his own set of struggles and his own significant moral failings in his early writings, but none of these crossed the line into criminality or even the suspicion of it. His record stands clean in that specific regard. After looking closely at L. Frank Baum's life, from his birth to his death, and examining the context of his times, we can clearly answer the question. Was the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz a suspected criminal? The answer is a definitive no. There is simply no historical evidence to support such a claim, no police records. No court documents, no credible newspaper reports from his era, no letters or memoirs from those who knew him that suggest any criminal activity or even suspicion of it. His various business failures, while financially devastating for him and his family, were just that, failures. There were not instances of fraud, embezzlement, or any other illegal act. Bankruptcy is a legal process, not a crime. His personal life, though private, showed no signs of legal trouble. He was a dedicated family man. The only significant blot on L. Frank Baum's record comes from his editorials in the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer. These writings, expressing deeply racist and genocidal sentiments towards Native Americans, are indeed horrifying. They are a moral stain on his legacy. They reveal a darker, more uncomfortable side to the man who created such a beloved world of wonder. However, it is crucial to understand the distinction between a moral failing and a legal crime. His words, however repugnant, were not treated as criminal offenses at the time they were published. He was not suspected of committing a crime because of them. He was not investigated by authorities for incitement to violence, even if, in a modern context, such words might face different scrutiny. The condemnation of these words today is a moral and ethical one. It's about how we view history and justice. It is not about him being a suspected criminal in the legal sense. L. Frank Baum's legacy is, and rightly so, overwhelmingly tied to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and his other imaginative stories. He created a universe that has captured the hearts of millions. He gave us characters like Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion. These stories teach lessons of courage, heart, brains, and the importance of home. They have endured for generations. It is important to acknowledge the full complexity of historical figures. We should not shy away from the uncomfortable truths. Baum's racist editorials are a part of his story. They show that even authors who create magical worlds can harbor deeply flawed and harmful views. Understanding this complexity is vital for a complete view of history, but this understanding must be accurate. It must respect the facts. And the facts show that while Baum had significant ethical failings in his early career, these did not involve criminal behavior or suspicion of it. His journey through life was marked by perseverance, creativity, and often financial struggle. He was a dreamer who worked hard to bring his visions to life, for better or worse. He was not a hidden criminal. His challenges were of the purse, and his biggest ethical missteps were with the pen. The enduring appeal of his stories stands, but so too does the uncomfortable truth of his earlier, darker words. Yet, even with these truths laid bare, the specific claim of L. Frank Baum being a suspected criminal holds no basis in reality. His life, for all its ups and downs and moral complexities, was lived without the shadow of legal suspicion.